Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be talking about One Blood by Denene Millner. This is an intergenerational historical fiction novel that I picked up relatively recently. In this story, you are following basically like three women who fall into three different generations of this specific family line. The story begins with Grace, who lives in Virginia in the 1960s, and she's mainly being raised by her grandmother, who is a midwife in the area. So Grace is kind of like learning the ways of being a midwife from her grandmother and things like that when things happen, won't get into it, and she can no longer live with her grandmother, and she ends up getting sent up to New York where her Aunt Hattie lives, and she really doesn't fit in that situation or with her Aunt Hattie, things like that. Her Aunt Hattie actually left Virginia because she wanted to like move up in society and things like that, and she spends her time kind of helping raise these upper class black girls to be well mannered, and she gets them ready for like debutante balls and all of these other things that Grace has like no idea about and does not feel comfortable like being a part of. The next point of view is Dolores, or Lolo, and she is someone who has gotten married to this man named Tommy, and she has kept a secret from her husband where she's unable to have biological children, but she like convinces her husband that it's actually him that's creating the issue, and so they decide to adopt two children, and it's about her reckoning with like what she wants her life to be and becoming a mother and what that life is like and things like that, and her dealing with her past and how that impacts her life as a mother. And of course there are secrets amongst a variety of people in this family, and that those secrets start to impact their family life. And then the final point of view is from Ray, who is one of the adopted daughters of Lolo. She discovered when she was a kid the papers about her adoption, but she never brought it up to her parents, thinking that like, if they didn't bring it up, then I'm not going to bring it up kind of situation. But she's always basically known since she was around like 10-12 years old that she was adopted. But you are following Ray mainly when she's an adult herself. She's married and she's about to have her own kid, but she starts to discover that there are a lot of secrets being held by various people in her family, and there's a lot that she needs to reckon with, both herself as she's becoming a mother as well as dealing with her own parents, both the biological and adoptive parents. So this book spans like a number of decades. Like I believe it's, like I said, it starts in the 1960s, and I believe it goes through basically like the early 2000s as you are following these different generations and the lives that they lead. And the story covers a variety of topics and themes. The one thing I will say up front is that there are a number of trigger warnings I would give for this book. One of the things that's explored in here is like the trauma that Black women deal with, as well as like generational trauma in general. So I would definitely look up content warnings for this, but there is rape and assault and sexual assault and abuse and child abuse throughout this book. So, just wanted to give that heads up in advance. And like, those topics were really difficult to read about at times. Like, especially the first part of this book just feels like so heavy and intense. And there was a part of me that like was not sure if I could keep going with the book, but then it switched perspectives and I was like, okay going forward. But the first part just felt like so like heavy and traumatic that I was just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And overall, my experience with this book was kind of a mixed bag. Like, there are parts of this I really enjoyed, and there are parts of this that I just didn't really get along with personally. Part of that is the writing style itself. They're kind of like these big paragraphs. I'm going to see if I can try to find it, where a character is reflecting on something, and like the beginning of a chapter will give you like what year this is taking place in, so you can kind of have a sense of like how far along in their lives they are since like the last chapter is passed, things like that. But then the character will like be reflecting on something that happened in their past, and then it will like fully jump into that scene. So like this book jumps around in time a lot more than you might realize. It doesn't go like fully chronological. And so sometimes I would feel myself like losing my bearings a little bit, trying to figure out whether an event that a character was talking about was currently happening or happened at a previous point in their lives. And it might just be like a couple of years sometimes that you're jumping back to see these scenes. But I would kind of like lose my bearings a little bit while reading this book, which would kind of like take me out of the story. In my opinion, Ray and Lolo's sections are like the strongest of this book. Like, I had the hardest time with Grace's section, partially because, like I said, it feels the most brutal, but it also feels like a lot of like really dramatic things happen to Grace that feel, I mean, it's not like unrealistic, but it's just like a lot happens, and I'm just like, it felt very just like dramatic. To me, like Lolo and Ray's point of view felt slightly more grounded in, not that like difficult things don't happen to them, but it just felt more grounded to me. And maybe that's just me also preferring like more contemporary stories. It's also nice because you see like a direct overlap between Lolo and Ray's storylines, and so like you see the connections a little bit better, you see the relationships a little bit better. Grace feels a lot more disconnected for reasons that are very obvious while you're reading the book, but it also just made like the transition between those two sections, going from Grace to Lolo, felt a lot more abrupt than going from Lolo to Ray. And one of the interesting things about this book specifically is that the author herself writes that she is adopted, and so it feels like the author herself is like more connected to the Lolo and Ray parts of the book, which may also be a reason why those sections felt stronger to me. And so part of me was like wondering if this book was structured differently, whether I would enjoy it more. But again, that feels more like a personal preference thing than anything else, because I think the real story that's trying to be told here is about like generational trauma and how you pass along traumas to the future generations if you haven't healed from the ones that you've had to deal with. You see like throughout this book how the older generations, the adults in that part of the story, just make choices and make decisions that aren't necessarily best for the kids that they are in charge of, just because they're dealing with their own stuff, which is just like, you know, true for everyone. And so it's like really heartbreaking to see those things and to see those scenes and stuff like that. Like, this is a book that's full of morally gray, complicated characters who make bad decisions across the board. Like, there's no true like 100% hero really in this book, and there are points throughout this book where you just want to like yell at these characters or shake them or something along those lines, which, you know, is a testament to the writing itself as well, the fact that the author is able to create these complex characters where you do kind of understand why they're making the problematic decisions that they're making, but also as a reader, you're just like, I wish you wouldn't though. So yeah, in the end, I think I graded this book like a 3.5 stars. It was like so close to being a 4-star book. It has like all these elements that I would typically really enjoy, but there's just something about the writing style and the way that it was structured that didn't make me fully fall in love with it. But it is a book that I would recommend to people, especially if you enjoy like intergenerational stories. Then I think that there's something here worth checking out. So yeah, those are my thoughts on One Blood. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read this book, what your thoughts were on it, because I'd love to talk to more people who read this book to see what they felt about this book. Or if you have any questions, feel free to leave that down in the comment section as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.